I know it sounds crazy. I am rolling actually with Georgia still to win the whole thing over what looks like a super team from Columbus, Ohio a few days ago.
Hello and welcome in. It's always college football. I'm your host, Greg McElroy, and today is Tuesday, December 24th. It's Christmas Eve. So we appreciate you guys being with us here today. We're going to talk a little college football. We have some college football games actually coming up today. So hope you guys get to tune in, take a peek at some of the games coming up. Had some games yesterday. We got more games coming up down the rest of the week. But today we are going to just have a little bit of a conversation with a good friend of ours, Josh Pate, of the Josh Pate's College Football Show and CBS Sports. He's going to join us. We're going to talk about the playoff. We're going to talk about some tweaks that might need to be made, some things that maybe we should look at, how we should evaluate these teams, maybe who he is thinking about, who might win the national championship. We'll get to that. And then we'll talk a little bit about these quarterfinal games coming up. So let's dive in here in just a moment to a great conversation with our good friend Josh Pate. All right, he's the host of the Josh Pate College Football Show. He is a good friend, a guy that I support. I love watching his show, watch it every time it's on. Not often live, but I usually catch it after the fact. I don't stay up late enough to watch when you guys go live at 7 o'clock there Central Time. You can check him out right on the YouTube channel, Josh Pate College Football Show. But Josh Pate, CBS Sports, Josh Pate College Football Show. He joins us now. JP, what's up, buddy?
What are you doing? You working early mornings? Is there something going on maybe radio about 3 hours down the road from me?
Well, I don't know. Like sometimes Kublik's on your show sometimes. So like I just have to avoid that show. It's on Thursdays most of the time. Sometimes he'll show up on a Tuesday show. So I'm like, I need to know what's coming before I decide to subscribe, download, and listen to this episode. You know what I mean?
For what it's worth, the show that Kublik is on is my third highest traffic show of the week. For what that's worth. Now, is there correlation? Did I bring him on because that was already the case? Insignificant. I want to throw it out there as we get started.
I think it's as long as we understand that. There is a game that you have going on similar times, though. So I get it. Thursdays are wild. And it's that's why we do. I always listen to your preview shows on Tuesdays. I listen to the Sunday recap shows. It's been good. I listen to you guys, Cover 3, listen to a bunch of different podcasts. So I always enjoy getting different perspectives, and I usually align with the way you see things. So let's dive in. We'll start with last week. A lot of negativity. I haven't had a chance to listen to your show yet. Last minute Christmas shopping got in the way today. But I have not had a chance to listen to your take on how you felt about the first round games. Just overarching takeaway. Do you have one?
Exactly what I expected. I think it's best to adopt what you've done since those games. Just be off the internet for a little while. It's not the worst thing in the world. I kid you not, man, like I got people in my social circle who update and refresh Twitter after every play on a game they're watching. And I got folks who totally put their phone like over here on another counter and they don't look at it. The latter group of people are so much happier than the former group of people right now. Now, I could also apply that as a case study to life in general, but I noticed, I think you've probably seen this too, in the year of our Lord 2024, everybody wants to say something so profound. Everybody's just dying to tweet that profound statement. And unfortunately, this past weekend, it was a lot of people lifting the hood on the engine that is the college football playoff and realizing if we put 12 teams in this thing, there are going to be a lot of blowouts in the first round. Just collective gasp, which was to me one of the more predictable things that we could see coming. Commonsensically, you should have seen that coming. Point spread wise, you saw that coming. So it was no great shock. I think what bothered me to no end over the past week, it didn't start this past weekend, but what bothered me was this amplification of the idea that if you get a result from sports that you don't like, something's broken. And if you get a result from sports that doesn't kind of jive with your worldview and it doesn't entertain you to a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, then, well, we need fixes. You don't always need fixes. Sometimes that's just the way it goes. We score in threes. We score in sevens. The ball's shaped weird. There's vast dichotomy in depth and strength of roster and resource in this sport. So sometimes that's going to happen. It was happening in the old model. That's why, I was never crazy about expansion, but we got it. So whatever. I'm willing to accept it, but I also accept it conditionally. And the condition is I kind of get how this sport works. My big question to anyone who's all up in arms about the wrong teams got put in and we need to overhaul this thing is, number one, what is the purpose of a playoff to you? And that goes down this whole other rabbit hole. But what is the purpose of a playoff? But number two, are you for the best teams or the most deserving teams? Because I have found that that is the stem of a bunch of the disagreement out there. Like, to me, it should always be about the most deserving teams. Caveat, folks, before you yell at me, as long as you have properly defined what deserving is. Because if you've got those bullet points properly identified, it should be a no-brainer. It should be the most deserving teams in. And if it's the best teams, then a lot of people I normally don't agree with have made the same point I would make there in their rebuttal. And that is, why really play the games? If you get to the end and the rankings don't coincide with what you think are the best teams, if you're for manually overriding the system anyway, what's the system worth?
Well, I think that's just your veiled way of saying that USC should have made the playoffs because they were in the AP poll like the whole year, or somewhere along the lines of that. I think they were still at 6-6 at the end of the season, 7-5 at the end of the season. I think you still had them like 13th, thereabouts.
Hey, good win for Penn State. Really underrated win for Penn State.
No, it's all. I totally. We're on the same page. I for one, just because Indiana and SMU and Tennessee did not perform up to the standard that we would expect them to perform, does not mean the committee got it wrong. It just means that data point that day, those teams were not ready for prime time. They weren't. And it doesn't mean that Ole Miss would have fared better. It doesn't mean that Bama would have or South Carolina would have.
But even if they would have, Greg, even if I rubbed a magic 8-ball and I was 100% convinced Bama would have played Notre Dame down to the wire, it's irrelevant if their resume did not warrant them being in. You don't get judged. This is what I got into such a knockdown, drag-out fight with a friend of mine this past weekend because they're of the opinion that the results of the first round prove that the committee got it wrong. So I'm like, okay, but if I hit the rewind button to Selection Sunday, I know you, and I know good and well you said that they got the right teams in. That's it. The body of work is in front of you. The resume is in front of you, and you either got a passing grade or a failing grade. And look, there's some really smart kids who get a failing grade every year because they're lazy. I was one of them, by the way, back in high school. So if I would smoke you in a spelling bee, but you handled your business in class and got an A and I didn't and I get an F, and you go to the county spelling bee and embarrass our entire class, you still should have been there. I didn't earn my way in. And so that goes back to the question. It's fundamental here. Best, most deserving. Do you think the committee is something that is built to assign placements in a playoff to sports, to football teams? Or do you think it should be a Netflix production company that's just built to deliver the most entertaining product?
Well, I can't speak for Netflix. I don't get to watch a lot of streaming television right now. I'm sure they have great products. I don't know. I haven't watched a good movie in years. So we'll see what happens. It's no shots, by the way. We'll just see. The other thing I would say is people have been constantly pointing to viewership. Oh, viewership tank. Well, I think that the second and third highest rated games of the season were played this past weekend. Indiana and Notre Dame in a game that was 27-3, averaged 13.4 million viewers. And then on the other side of the coin, if I'm not mistaken, I think Tennessee and Ohio State, a game that was completely uncompetitive, averaged 14.3 thereabouts. And then up against the NFL, you had 8+ and 6+. So I feel like, while even though the games got sideways, the level of intrigue and the consumption of the product was still pretty good, which means I don't think the decision makers are going to start changing their protocols because they just delivered a winning product. So what are your thoughts on that?
I could not care less about TV ratings, and I wish 99.9% of America would adopt that mentality because they don't affect you. You are actually the 0.1%. It does affect.
I don't get affected by it. My thing doesn't change. I just feel like when ratings are not good, that encourage. Why do you think Rob Manfred's trying to introduce the Golden Bat Rule? Why do you think that they have a problem right now? Why did they implement the in-season tournament in the NBA?
Well, when baseball
ratings aren't good.
Look, when they took the All-Star game from Atlanta, the baseball died to me. So I have no clue. I don't even know what's happening over there. My point is this. So you ever come up on those moments where you know it would be intellectually dishonest to use something as ammunition to bolster your argument, but you also know the rest of the people in the room aren't smart enough to figure it out. So like you could weaponize it, but ethically should you? The TV ratings are one of those things where, like, we're making an argument here. I could go into my bag, and if I'm claiming the committee got it right, I could arm myself with what you just said. I could arm myself with, hey, man, the ratings were high, so obviously they did get it right. But even now, this is how you know intellectually and ethically I'm pure in this entire fight. I don't use it because I don't care if 1 billion people watched it. I don't care if 14 people watched it. I understand the real world we live in, but theoretically, nothing about that should exist. And I also think we're not stupid enough to fail to understand, yeah, if Bama would have been in there, they would have gotten an even bigger number. If it were Bama, Penn State, if it were, who else? Miami going to Notre Dame, yeah, probably would have done a bigger number. I go back to the same thing I'll always go back to. Are we running a production company, or are we running a committee that is built to honor, and here's a phrase that's dirty these days, honor the spirit of competition? Because as far as I can tell, man, we're still playing football. It's still a sport. Spirit of competition, results on field, resume, what you've earned, all those cliches, coach speak, if you will. I think it's supposed to still matter last time I checked.
Well, I don't know. I got to check the script to see if those things matter. There's
you get a copy of that. Yeah, I don't get
exactly. If only we had those for Friday Night Lines, the script, we would be doing real well. I can promise you that. The other thing I would say about this whole process, I think, look, if we're living in 2024 and 2024 is a silo, I think they got it right. I don't have any problem with what went down. The fact that the games got sideways only indicates that the teams that were 5 through 8, pretty dang good. We already knew that. So I'm not sure that was some revelation that was made last week. The other thing I would say is that if we're looking at it through a silo, I do think the criteria for admission needs to be altered a little bit. And it doesn't mean that it wasn't right this year, but if we're looking as this is a 1-year sample size, let's adjust it and make it better in the future. One thing I would like to see them do, really incentivize non-conference competition. With all due respect to Indiana, I'm not picking on them. I'm just using them as an example. Their non-conference schedule left an awful lot to be desired. And with bloated conferences, you can't always play at teams that would challenge you. So we don't know. I mean, no one really knows what Indiana is. We know they didn't play well against Ohio State, but I also looked at a couple self-inflicteds. If they don't drop a punt, they don't allow a punt return touchdown, it might be a different game. So I do think we need to incentivize non-conference strength. And then overall, if we can incentivize strength of schedule even more, that would be beneficial for the long-term health and prospects of the sport and the postseason format. So how do you feel about some of the tweaks I would make here in the near term?
I wholeheartedly agree, wholeheartedly endorse everything you just said. That's another one of the side roads off of the conversation, because if I were arguing in a theoretical and you came back at me and you said, yeah, but I mean, the committee should weigh strength of schedule differently, I would say, hey, I agree. But counterpoint, have they been told to? Because if they haven't been told to, what in the world are they supposed to do? They're supposed to go rogue? Like, that's not how that actually works. So yeah, I would love a fundamental alteration. Listen, I would love for this to be litigated publicly, by the way. That's an entirely different side road. A lot of side roads here off the main. But I agree with you. And when it comes to strength of schedule, I got a philosophy that people would call radical, but it's the most common sense philosophy I've ever heard. You know how people sit around all the time when they're trying to arm themselves for a debate like this, and they would say, well, so-and-so would be favored on a neutral field, and I think that's supposed to carry weight. Well, okay, that's great, but underdogs win all the time, so that's irrelevant. Like, what are we talking about?
Not last weekend, but yes, most, yes.
Sure, yeah, most of the time. So everyone who brings Vegas into the college football argument then gets shouted down by this other group. And most of the time, the other group is right at shouting them down, because that has no business in actually seeding a tournament. But I'll tell you where I wish it was injected tomorrow, and that is defining strength of schedule. I do not care about wins and losses as much as I care about the raw power of your schedule. So what I'd love to do, instead of just mind-numbing arbitrary things like ranked wins, just sweep it out of here. Just it's so low-hanging fruit. It has no place here. What I'd love to do is get like a little coalition, pick any acronym you want here, but a coalition of the best cappers in Vegas. Get a bunch of them. Just have a huge coalition of them and have them turn in their numbers every week and put them in the blender, pour them out, and it's 1 through 134. And that's how you rate teams, not for the committee. That's how you rate teams to determine what your real strength of schedule is. Because you brought up USC a second ago, and I think it's a perfect example. USC could either look at you and they could strike you as a 5-7 team, or they could strike you the same way Florida could strike you late in the year, as a team that's chock full of future Sunday players that on any given Saturday could give you a disproportionate pushback to other teams with a similar record because they got really, really good athletes and they've lost a bunch of one-possession games, and so their record sucks. They don't deserve to be in the mix. But if I play them, I got to understand there's a little difference in the pushback that a Florida's given me late in the year versus a Wake Forest is giving me late in the year. And right now there's no room for understanding that in the way that we determine strength of schedule. So I agree with you. That's how I'd overhaul strength of schedule. And I'd also absolutely welcome incentivizing more challenging strength of schedule. And you either do that by not punishing folks when they lose against top competition, or you severely penalize someone who just doesn't schedule up out of conference.
Yeah. I think the latter is really the way, because you have to, the data points have to matter to an extent.
Yeah.
But at the same time, those that don't play, you are skating on remarkably thin ice. I think that's the only way to look at it. The other thing that's driving me absolutely berserk, it's driving me crazy. I am so sick of the argument, well, because Indiana lost, the Big Ten stinks. You know what I mean? Like, that really bothers me. Because SMU lost and Clemson lost, the ACC, see, I told you, they're terrible. That to me is just such, one, it's low-hanging fruit. Two, I don't know how you can draw those conclusions. Like, in what court of law could you ever present that argument and allow a judge to rule in your favor? Like, why is that an argument? And it goes across the board. See, the SEC is overrated because Tennessee got blown out. It's all over the place, and I just don't understand the thought process or the logic of it. With rearranged schedules and teams on the move and realignment all the time, like we just saw a Pac-12 team come in to the Big Ten, the big bad Big Ten, go undefeated. Well, the Pac-12 hadn't made the playoffs but like 2 times in the last 8 years, and yet Oregon's number 1 team in the country. Arizona State's also in the field. Colorado was almost in the field. Like, there's a lot of really good football being played all over the place. So why do we have to paint with a broad brush when it comes to evaluating conference supremacy based on individual outcomes that support your narrative?
I think there's such a hunger for confirmation bias in this sport that people are willing to attach themselves to anything. It goes back to what I was talking about a second ago. When you see something laying on the ground that you could fashion into a weapon to help yourself in a fight, you're going to pick it up. And similarly, if you have a preconceived notion like the Big Ten is superior or the SEC is superior, and you see something laying down like, ooh, Tennessee just got blown out by Ohio State, you weaponize it. It doesn't matter that Ohio State's 2-13 or whatever it is against the SEC. It doesn't matter if Georgia goes and blows out Notre Dame with their backup quarterback next week. It doesn't matter because the counterpoints are all pushed to the side. You only arm yourself with the points. And this is not even a shot at the Big Ten, because it gets just as stupid on the other side of the equation. It gets just as dumb if you're trying to defend any kind of conference's stance holistically by using singular outcomes in games. I used to get driven crazy by it in bowl season, Greg, because you would look at the bowl records, and this is even back when bowls, no one sat them out. So every team was going at it full speed, but I would look at the way the bowls were paired, and you would have like the SEC's number 6 versus the ACC's number 2. ACC team wins by 3. And people say, oh, ACC up 1-0 on the SEC. Up 1-0 in what? We haven't equally seeded this thing. There is no deterministic value here, for me at least, when it comes to conference supremacy. So it's always going to be like that. You can't shut it up, but you don't have to participate in it. That's true.
Well, I'll say this. I'm glad the fans engage. Like, I'm happy. I'm great with that. Like, for those of you listening to Josh's show on a weekly basis, our show on a weekly basis, like, I want you to engage in this behavior. I just don't want the authorities in the sport, the media members, to engage in this. It's ridiculous. It's redundancy. And it just drives me crazy. Like I said, I'm all for people being crazy and outspoken and standing up for what they believe in favor of their tribalistic nature of following one specific school. I love that. We're nowhere without y'all. We want you to continue on. But I hope that the people that have some say and some people that have an ability to move the needle, I hope that they would operate with slightly cooler heads. Let's fast forward to some of the games coming up here in the quarters. Everyone, we know the 2 big ones. All right, Rose and Sugar. We'll talk about those in a second. I still find Peach and Fiesta to be really fascinating. I've always wondered what Boise would do in a scenario like this. I've always wondered that. I've always thought that maybe they could thread the needle and maybe get the job done. I don't know if this version of Boise is quite capable, because I think this version of Boise is remarkably flawed beyond a great pass rush and an elite running back. But I'd love to see it happen. Not because it's Penn State, but just for Boise as confirmation for all the years they got left out. See, we can play with the big boys too.
I look at both of those games. It's just, well, number one, it's fascinating that the teams that got the buys are double-digit underdogs against teams that just played. Yes, we've got that. Okay, so that'll probably...
Okay, we'll fix seeding another day. Let's not do that now. We'll fix that another day.
So with Boise, I do agree with you. Like, I think it's a special player on an otherwise above-average team. You can look at that as disrespect. That's okay, because they get to play the game. So they get to try and shut everyone up. But as much as everyone's going to be focused on Genty and, can he get his against Penn State's defensive front? Greg, there's a world where he runs for 150 and they lose by 17. So there is that world. What I'm just utterly fascinated by in that one is actually on the Penn State side, and that is they were red hot against Oregon in the second half of that game offensively in the Big Ten championship game, and they lost. But I thought 200-yard rushers, Aller goes off through the air. They incorporated more than just Tyler Warren in the passing game. They looked great. Then they offensively did not much of anything against SMU. I'm a believer the weather impacted Penn State every bit as much as it did SMU. Penn State's just a much better team. I think when they go play indoors, I think it's going to jumpstart Penn State's offense again. And I think they're going to make probably as good a statement as Penn State has made under James Franklin in a while in that game. I think they're going to tilt the table pretty early. With Arizona State, I want you to think about this. It's our first time through a 12-team playoff, so everything's new, of course. Do you understand how crazy it is that we've got a legitimate look-ahead spot in the playoff? Nobody is talking about Texas, Arizona State. Everyone is asking about Texas one question, and that is, after they get out of Atlanta, how healthy are they? And who do they draw? Do they draw Oregon? Do they draw Ohio State? I had FanDuel hit me up today and say, hey, here are the hypothetical lines for that game. And I'm like, watch. We're still 10 days away from this Peach Bowl, right? Can you imagine Kenny Dillingham just feet up on the desk, just listening to this? I imagine him paddleball, just whistling, popping some bubble gum in his office, like, okay, that's fine. All right.
Well, I think that Kenny Dillingham, all I had to do, we visited with him on selection day on the selection show. And I was like, I've known Kenny for a while. Like, I was trying to poke some fun at him, like get him to crack a smile, like give him a hard time. He was straight-faced, mad. You guys, I mean, I'm like, Kenny, we just thought that you should get the number 3 seed over Boise. And he stone-faced, like ticked off. Like, you just orchestrated one of the great turnarounds in the history of the sport. You have a first-round bye. You're going to have the opportunity to get Texas. What a cool opportunity for your school. And he wasn't having it. Like, no fun. We're done. And I think he's great behind closed doors, but man, in the public eye, he's ticked off. And he's using that. Will it matter? I think is the question mark, because Texas will be ready to go. It's just, will they have their full attention on the Sun Devils to play at the highest level possible?
I'll tell you something. It's a theory that I have right now. You can draw on when Utah beat Alabama way back in the day in the Sugar Bowl. You can draw on UCF against Auburn. You can draw on Boise, Oklahoma. It's hard to even get these sentences out of your mouth because you already know what the pushback on it's going to be. But you've played for Alabama, and you know what that dynamic is like when you go to the SEC championship game to play Florida. You also know what it's like when you come up short of your preseason goals and then you get handed a trip to New Orleans to play a Utah. Or if you're playing for Auburn, you want to win the Iron Bowl, go to Atlanta, go to the playoff. Oh, we're going to play UCF in what is a consolation prize game. So that's not an excuse. Those teams lost those games. However, I remember a player on Auburn's team telling me going into that Peach Bowl when they played UCF, this is like our 6th biggest game of the year. Whether it's the right attitude to have, it's not. I'm not here to litigate that. I'm just saying no one in Penn State's locker room will think that about this Boise game. No one in Texas's locker room will think that about Arizona State because there is maximum implication, like there's maximum meaning on the line for these games. And we've actually, If you think about the history of the sport, when you've seen those David-Goliath matchups, it's normally been in a non-playoff bowl game. We have not seen it with actual playoff stickers attached to it. And so for everyone who's going to be showing those Fiesta Bowl highlights from back in 06 and 07, I'm not quite sure it's the same dynamic. And that is with a mountain of respect to what those schools were able to accomplish.
I really am curious, like really, really am curious. And I know that Boise's the whole the conversation about the reseeding and they shouldn't have this, they shouldn't have that, whatever. They've now had motivation on their side for like 4 weeks by the time they tee this thing up. Does that start to weigh heavy? Like, to me, the whole nobody respects you thing's great. That's awesome. Until you're down 10-0, and then you start to think, well, I know why nobody respects us. You know what I mean? Like, I do think time is not on their side in playing the underdog card a little bit going into these games on Jan 1 and on New Year's Day, New Year's Eve.
Yeah, there's another dynamic there too, and that is both teams don't have equal rest. And there's a weird way in my head where that helps Texas to me. That helps Penn State because they haven't both sat around for a month. One of them hearing how big a favorite they are, the other one hearing how big a dog they are. Like, Penn State and Texas had to go handle business. They did it at home emphatically, and they also understand, like I said a second ago, this is not the end of the road. This is not like a consolation, backup BCS game prize or anything like that. You've got your goals, and this is not a detour from those goals. Your goals run straight through these dudes. Like, you are superior in just about every way, staff-wise, roster-wise, resource-wise. You've got all the edges and maximum motivation. We have not seen that dynamic in these sorts of games before. That's what fascinates me.
It will be. And we'll move to the other two. You already referenced one thing I was going to hit you on. Like, being Oregon and sitting at home watching Ohio State do what they did is uncomfortable. I don't care what anybody says. Like, it's an Oregon Duck. We already beat these guys. Fine. That's uncomfortable to see them knock the rust off the way they did. And now they have a ton of momentum going into a game against you. On the other side, Georgia, Carson Beck's out. We know that. Gunner Stockton's in. Notre Dame rolls on both sides of the ball. The passing attack looks super sharp. That was the question mark. The secondary looked great. The line of scrimmage looked great. They lost Riley Mills, but things are looking really promising for Notre Dame. Are we going to get to a point, whether it's this year or down the road, where you are better served playing that first round game as opposed to getting the bye and having a 4-week layoff?
I think there's a world where that happens. The counter to that is the data and analytics guys will tell you the first round bye is always worth more because of the injury concern. Riley Mills, perfect case in point. You just mentioned it. I have been of the opinion it's a conditional thing. It's a case by case thing. There's some probably brackets in some years where I certainly want the bye. Probably more often than not, I would want the bye. But there are situations that I would just 100 times out of 100 rather have Penn State's draw than Oregon's draw. And you can push back on me all you want to about that. I am baking in the threat of injury to that opinion. I've baked it all in. No one's breaking news to me on that front. So, yeah, I also think with Notre Dame and Georgia, we talk about dynamics a lot here, but there's yet another dynamic. The whole rallying around the backup dynamic. College football, way different than the NFL on multiple fronts, but one of them is you lose your quarterback in the NFL, largely you're just screwed.
You're dead.
Guys looking to next year. In college football, sometimes that's true, but when you have a deep program, and Georgia's one of them, you normally don't have trash on the bench as the backup. You got a serviceable guy on the bench that's your backup, and sometimes it's a guy from your home state. Sometimes it's a guy who's a program guy who's been around a long time. And sometimes, Greg, it's a guy the locker room may love. Now, they know he's not the most talented. They know there's a reason Carson Beck's been starting. But revisionist history is like, Georgia, man, Carson Beck went down. They held on against Texas. They came from behind against Texas with Gunner Stockton in. And so this is not a team that has to score 35 or 40 on you in an ideal situation to beat you. All I'm saying is, Notre Dame, we know who they are. Great program, great team this year. There is a world where the starter going down for Georgia cumulatively raises the level of play from the rest of that organization to the point where in the aggregate, the outcome, the output pulls even, or in some cases, it exceeds what you would have gotten from them otherwise. And that makes no sense to a pro sports fan. And it should. because you're trying to apply logic to an illogical situation. But we have seen that happen, dude. One of my favorite things to do is not see quarterbacks get hurt. That sucks. But when it happens, I will blindly bet on teams having to play their backup in college, because what I'm talking about happens more often than not. Like there's an immense amount of pride in a lot of these places where you raise your level of play and all of a sudden, wow, Georgia's leading with their backup. And dude, they didn't look this good when Beck played.
I think there's another angle of this too, that maybe this is just too far, but to me, I'm almost looking at it like, while I look at Gunner Stockton, Notre Dame's going to be preparing for some smoke and mirrors. Like, they don't know what this offense looks like with him having had multiple weeks to prepare to become the starter. So is there like the benefit of secrecy on the side of Georgia, knowing this offense could completely change with Gunner Stockton at the helm and Notre Dame's chasing ghosts for the next 2 weeks?
I think so. And then outside of that, when they played Texas the first time, really both times, but the first time out in Austin, I kind of think of that as a blueprint. Riley Leonard, probably not even as good a thrower as Quinn Ewers has been, but I think of it just in symbolically of Georgia went out there to Austin and just totally neutralized Texas. I mean, they threw a crowbar in the bicycle spokes, is what I always like to say. And so if you defensively can dial that up for Texas in the regular season, I've got to think you can dial that up, especially against a guy who probably does not even threaten you through the air as much as the other guys you've faced. Like McElroy got his on the ground. Dart got his on the ground. But Haynes King got over 100 on the ground. Those guys are bigger threats to beat you over the top than Riley Leonard is. So there's a world where, Gunner Stockton goes in and maybe you've prepared for one thing and you get another thing. But then the follow-up question is, how many points does Georgia need? If they need 30, I don't feel great. If they need 17, they can scratch out 17 or 23 or something like that.
Well, I think Vegas thinks at this point the combined total between the two is 44.
There you go.
If they get to 30, they should be feeling pretty good based on some pre-game prognostications. Finally, right now, it's impossible to ask the question, but I'm going to anyways. Do you have a favorite? Like, to me, it's almost very difficult for me not to take Ohio State at the moment, based on what I just saw. And knowing that they're going to be in Pasadena in 2 domes, and if you can throw it in sub-zero temperatures, you can probably throw it in domes. I think you're probably going to be all right. And with Will Howard playing that confidently and the defense playing that well, it's hard for me not to take the Buckeyes. Do you have a lean right now?
It's tough to argue with that. You're just having, to me, when I say what I'm about to say, it is blindfolding myself and kind of throwing dice, because you got to work on theory right now. So I just mentioned my theory with Georgia. My theory with Georgia will either be proven against Notre Dame or it will crash and burn. Like a lot of people thought Indiana would make a lot of noise. Well, that crashes and burns in like the first half against Notre Dame. So this, what I'm about to say, could be similar. Ohio State's performance against Tennessee was probably the most thorough, just ripping of a spine that I've seen all year. Amazing. It was fueled by unprecedented levels of negativity and toxicity and doubt around that program and those players and that coaching staff. And that's wonderful. So we got that out of ourselves. Well, that source of fuel is no longer there for them the rest of the way. Everyone will pick them. Everyone will believe in them. They're going to go to controlled climate. They're going to fly 3,000 miles. They're going to go to the West Coast because they will not play Oregon at all this year unless they can see the Pacific Ocean, apparently. The way the draw has happened. So Oregon's a really good team, man. For all we know, the national title game's happening in Pasadena in 9 or 10 days or whatever. I slightly lean Oregon in that game right now, but I also like Texas a lot. And I also like Georgia a lot. And so, again, Ohio State may just buzzsaw this thing. I am going to still guess that someone trips them up, and I'm going to look in what I think is the infinitely more workable side of the bracket, and I'm going to have some confidence that what I said about Georgia happens. And I think if they can get to the title game, at that point they've proven they can win with Stockton. And I'm still, I know it sounds crazy, I am rolling actually with Georgia still to win the whole thing over what looks like a super team from Columbus, Ohio a few days ago.
It's hard to push back. I mean, they got the skins, and they had a guy like that filled in for an injured JT Daniels and led him to 2 straight championships. Gunner Stockton, next man up type of mentality, type of program. I don't think it would surprise anybody. This has been great, buddy. Really enjoyed visiting with you. Always enjoy listening to your show. Josh Pate College Football Show, formerly Late Kick. But I like Josh Pate College Football Show. And man, goodness, you guys are so wealthy being able to have a studio that's that nice. I mean, y'all are just printing cash up there in Nashville. So congrats on the new digs. It's pretty fancy.
I want to emphasize to the viewers, those are Greg's words, not mine. Nowhere contractually is that stated, but I appreciate it, brother.
It's great. But we've enjoyed listening to you all season long. We'll continue to do so throughout the playoffs, and we'll catch up again here soon, buddy.
All right, man. Have a good one in New Orleans.
That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. I'll continue to encourage all of you to like, to rate, and to subscribe to the show. We appreciate very much all the support that you guys have shown us over the entire season. It's been awesome. We're not going anywhere, by the way. For those of you that are thinking we're going away after the season ends, that's not the case. We are year-round here at Always College Football. So once the season wraps up and we crown a champ, we'll dive into some portal. We'll dive into some recruiting. We'll set the table for some spring ball. We'll do some coaching carousel. A lot of fun stuff still coming up here in the off season. So know that while we are here and we are heavily consumed in the fall, we're still going to be here very much in the spring and the summer as well. Once again, Merry Christmas to all you guys. For those of you that are celebrating with your families, we hope that wherever it is you're going, if you're listening to us in the car, going to see family, we appreciate you being here. It's been awesome. We are so grateful for you, and we promise we will continue to give you the best possible college football content that you can find here on any of the podcast platforms and on the ESPN College Football YouTube channels. For all of us here at Always College Football, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, I'm Greg. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.